recorded history, the betrayal of a husband has never been treated as a private sorrow, but as a public catastrophe, almost cosmic emergency, an assault on bloodline, property, inheritance, divine covenant, and the entire architecture of power. And when a woman was accused of adultery, the response was never quiet, never discreet, never merciful. It arrived with fire that roared in city squares, with water that closed over a sack in deliberate silence, with stones that turned neighbours into executioners, with ropes that dragged a body behind a cart until it came apart, with whips that wrote law across bare skin, with brands that turned shame into permanent scarlet scripture. And all of it was written down, debated by jurists, blessed by priests, funded by taxes, scheduled on market days, and performed in front of children so that the lesson would sink deep into the next generation. In the sun-bleached cradle of Mesopotamia, almost 4,000 years ago, Hammurabi ordered his scribes to carve into an 8-foot diorite stele that if a wife is caught lying with another man, both shall be bound and thrown into the river, yet the husband, called the owner of the wife, may spare her if he wishes, which almost no husband ever did, because mercy would have cast eternal doubt on the paternity of future sons and invited ridicule upon his house. And when rivers were inconvenient, the woman was stripped naked, buried to the waist in a pit outside the city gate, and the first stone was thrown by the betrayed husband or a male kinsman, while every free man of the community followed until blood and breath were gone, and the moral order was physically rebuilt by the same arms that had once protected her. In ancient Egypt, village councils sometimes handed adulterous women to the sacred crocodiles of the Nile or paid professionals to slice off nose and ears and abandon the mutilated body in the desert, so she would live long enough to feel herself become a walking warning. While inside royal harems, queens and concubines found guilty of conspiracy were forced to set themselves alight with torches handed to them by palace guards or were impaled on wooden stakes in the Asiatic manner, and even in death they were refused mummification so that jackals could scatter their bones and their names could be erased from the afterlife itself. The Hebrew Bible commanded that both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death, and the rabbis later specified that the woman must be taken outside the camp, stripped to the waist, thrown from a height twice her own body length, so her neck might break cleanly, and if she survived the fall, the witnesses would cast the first stones, followed by the entire congregation, so that no hand in Israel could claim innocence, and the land would not remain defiled. In classical Athens, a husband who caught his wife in the act could legally kill both lovers on the spot without trial, and if he chose restraint, he was required to divorce her instantly and expel her from the house or lose his own citizenship, while the male adulterer could be dragged to court, fined until ruin, or publicly humiliated by having a large radish forced into his anus, while his pubic hair was singed off with hot ashes. Yet the woman herself was simply banished from festivals, jewelry, and respectable company, social death, in a culture that lived by visible status, and some fathers locked guilty daughters in rooms with maddened horses until hooves ended the scandal. Republican Rome originally left punishment to the paterfamilias, who could kill his wife or daughter with impunity, provided a family council agreed. But Augustus turned private shame into imperial policy with the Lex Julia that confiscated half her dowry, relegated her to an island, and forced her to wear the prostitute's toga for the rest of her days. While emperors like Nero had ex-wives sewn into weighted sacks and drowned, and later Christian emperors brought back burning alive for women who slept with slaves, because the crime inverted the divine hierarchy of master and servant. Medieval Germany perfected the art of the sack. The condemned woman was shaved, stripped, sewn alive into coarse canvas, sometimes sharing the darkness with a hissing viper, a snarling dog, a shrieking rooster, and a venomous cat, representing the four elements in one final blasphemous sacrament, then paraded through jeering streets and rode to mid-river where the sack was pitched overboard, so she would drown in absolute silence, unable to scream or plead, while townspeople watched the struggle against the canvas. Until the bubbles stopped and the body floated downstream as a traveling sermon. When fire was chosen instead, the woman was tied to a stake in the market square, surrounded by dry faggots, while priests preached, and the crowd absorbed the lesson that female flesh, once corrupted, could only be purified by flames that began at the feet and climbed slowly so agony might last long enough to teach. In Puritan New England, the law books still threatened death, but magistrates preferred the whipping post, 39 lashes, the biblical maximum, laid on so hard that skin split and blood ran down into the dust, followed by hours in the pillory where former friends threw filth and stones, and then a lifetime wearing a red letter, A, sewn or branded so that shame would outlive the body itself. Across the Islamic world, the Quran demanded 4 eyewitnesses to actual penetration, a bar so impossibly high that legal stoning was rare. Yet popular justice often bypassed the Qadi, and crowds dragged accused women to the Nile or the Bosphorus and drowned them in sacks, exactly like their Christian neighbours centuries earlier. While Ottoman palace officials maintained a dedicated office for tying unfaithful harem women into silk bags and dropping them from the walls at midnight, so the fish could finish what honor began. In Mughal and Rajput India, family councils sometimes forced widows accused of earlier adultery onto their husband's funeral pyre long before sati became associated only with voluntary devotion. In colonial Louisiana, a free woman of color could be whipped from street corner to street corner while a crier shouted her crime, and then branded with the fleur-de-lis on both shoulders, so every mirror would remind her forever. Across every continent and every faith for 10,000 years, the female body became the chosen battlefield where patriarchal order reasserted itself through spectacle and pain, because a woman who loved the wrong man or loved too freely was declared more dangerous than murderers or traitors, and therefore had to be broken in public, erased from memory, scattered in rivers, consumed by fire, crushed by communal stones, whipped until identity dissolved, branded until shame became skin itself. And all of it, every scream, every bubble, every crackle of burning flesh, every thud of rock on bone, was designed to teach the same ancient purpose: to remind every daughter, sister, wife, and widow watching from the edge of the crowd that her body was never hers, that desire was treason, and that love, when it threatened power, would always be answered with terror that outlived the woman and echoed across centuries until even the wind seemed to carry the weight of those vanished voices, still whispering that they too had once dared to choose.